Good morning and welcome to The Point. It is Wednesday, May 18th, 2022. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the GBN Production YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channels 7, 11 and 20. And good morning to the loyal listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9. Thank you very much for joining us on another informative discussion here on To The Point. Joining me virtually this morning for this morning's program is the Supervisor of Elections at the Parliamentary Elections Office, Mr. Elvis Morain, and the Voter and Civic Registration Officer, Ferdinand Phillip. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. I know it's busy time for you both, so appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Blossom, and thank you very much for having us. And you are perfectly right there that we are in a very busy mode. So it's a privilege for us to still take time off to express concerns and also to speak to the public relative to elections. It's an entire nation thing. So we are happy to be part of this morning discourse. We also want to say good morning to the listening and viewing public. And we trust that we are going to offer the necessary clarity as we proceed throughout this program. So once again, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much. So let's start with one of the things that has been creating a lot of discussion since the announcement of the date, which is the issuing of the writ, registration, only 1 day for registration. There are people who are not aware of what the writ means when it is issued and when it is published. So just briefly explain for those who may be unaware of what's a writ and why does it signal that registration has ended.
All right. Good morning, Nadine, and thanks very much for that question. Now, let me, before I address specifically this, let me emphasize to the public that the coming into being of this the amended act to accommodate the electronic system, we were into continuous registration, right? Meaning that once someone turns 18, and the next opening office day, you go to the office and you make an application, to become an elector. So we have been doing that for years. Okay. So really and truly, while I do understand what some people are saying, but the issue of 1 day for registration, to me, the only people that should be affected is if you turn 18 on that day or the weekend. Because it's the responsibility of everyone to ensure that you participate. And I don't know why, but we may need to do a lot of work to let the society understand that, look, it's your responsibility. We have been doing this, other people have been doing this, encouraging people to get registered. And sometimes it's really mind-boggling to hear people are saying now, 1 day was left for registration. It's rather unfortunate that people didn't take heed to make sure that this is done. Now, when the writ is issued, right, what happens is that you now have returning officers signaling that, the election, you're into the election period. So, for example, our registration officers now would take the oath, right? Not all the registration officers, but of course, take the oath. Returning officer, that is for the execution of the elections. So the writ is issued to the individual. Yesterday, we had the writ issued, okay? The writ is issued, and once the writ is issued, it signals that all registration ceases. That is the act, right? So once the writ is issued, some people are making issue whether it is published or issued. It is issued, right? It is hit and issued once it's issued, right? The other part, the publication side of it, is that you have 10 clear days before nomination to publish, right? Notice of the writ. Okay, you have clear 10 days to publish, right? So it is not really hinged. The registration is not hinged on the publication. It is hinged on the issuance. All right, so I hope people understand this, So once it is issued, all registrations.
Then let's get to the list. The list of eligible voters is another thing that people have concern with. There are people who have noted their names are on the list twice when they search for it online. There are people who are not seeing changes that they've went into the offices to make. They're not seeing reflected online. And what was the other concern again? Not seeing the changes, seeing it twice. And when I remember the next one, I'll ask.
Right. So let me respond. As I remember, we will take them. Okay. Yes, we've heard some of these comments as well. Now, what people have to realize that the list online is reflective of your last publication. So, for example, our last publication would have been our addendum, that is for the period January to March 31st. So, for instance, anyone who would have done, anything, change of name, change of address, or you replace your card, or you are new registrant, you would not be reflected on the online list because that is not updated yet because of period, right? So it would update it in due course when we publish for election our first current list that is for the election, right? And that has to be published within 14 days, right, of the issuance of the writ. So therefore, we publish, then everyone, including the individuals who registered on the last day of registration, right, name would be on that list, right? If it's not on the list, then you have a 7-day window that is for claims and objection. So someone went, let's suppose they went on the last day of registration, and that list is published, and they didn't see the name, or even the name might be there but maybe in the wrong polling division, right? Or might be spelt incorrectly. You have a 7-day window to correct those things as before. So just to ease the minds of persons, once you would have done you went into the office, do anything, your registration updates, anything, your marriage, name, whatever, if you go online now, you would not see that change reflected.
Is it too late to make changes while registration has ceased? What if within the last month I've changed residence, I've gotten married within the last month? Can any changes other than registration take place at this point?
No. Okay, so you had the last day to do that, which was, as of Monday gone.
And another thing I was wondering, the long lines that I saw at all the constituency offices around the place, were they all new registrants, or were there some people who misunderstood what the day was for?
There were a combination of both, right? And we had to manage it. So I went personally, and I spoke to a few individuals there, and I said to them, just fill out what the reason that they were there for. And some yes came to replace the card. And I said, well, listen, you don't really need to replace the card to vote. I wish that priority could be given to the new persons, right? The new individuals. Some people took it. Some people said, well, okay, fine. They were happy for the clarity. Others decided, well, look, I've been here hours now, so I'll wait, right? But there were quite a number of people coming in for the first time too. And may I hasten to add, Blossom, it wasn't the people who turned 18 on the weekend or on the day. There were people who were in the 50s, people who were in the 40s, different age ranges, where people came on that day to have, for the very first time, to be registered. We can't give you a number as we speak, but at least this were the dynamics that we had as well.
While we're on the subject of the voters list, let me just ask two other questions I have here on WhatsApp. Somebody's asking, given today's technology, why can the online list be updated in real time?
Just say that again, you drop at the end of the question.
Oh, sorry. Given today's technology, why can't online list be updated in real time? And some of them are happy to hear those concerns. Now, we are not just dealing with any activity. This is elections,
all right? And we are governed by an act. And the acts prescribe as to how these things are to be done. So we have to make sure that we're within the law at all times, And let me maybe say to the public, now the online that the office really helped to manage and the people at ease is not really that we have to do that. We don't have to do that. We are not bound in the law to do that. But of course, we create that so that people can get that ease to do it. What we need to do is to publish, the quarterly publication and so on. All right. So I want to say to the public that it's not just about how everything else happened. And I see people making a lot of comparisons relative to an electoral process and to any other processes. People are saying, okay, but why can't you get your card in a day as your license? We have to understand that it's an electoral process and things have to be verified. You can't just put people on, you can't just do this, right? And that is why I sure, Blossom, you heard the comment people were making relative to the time it took for one person to register. But it's just that detail. We can't take things for chance. We've heard also people talk about why didn't have more than one computer system. It makes provision for one computer system. Now, the assistant registration officer has to, by oath, be under oath to do this, because there's, of course, the secrecy side of this. So we have to understand that it is not, while yes, people may feel, oh, you could have done that. It is not, you can't just do these things. We have to govern based on the strict conventions as to how this has to be operated.
Moving forward, June 23rd, which is, let's just say, roughly a month away, what's next for the PEO, preparing for that day? What's in the pipeline? What are the immediate things that need to be done? And what are the things that can wait until, let's say, June 22nd?
Let me give Mr. Phillip a chance to come in here.
Okay, again, good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
I guess in everyone's mind, moving forward.
And if it's my end, Mr. Phillip, I find you sound very low.
Yes, he is very low. Yes.
Sounding low. Yes, probably I need to speak a little louder.
Yes, that's much better.
Yes, as we go forward, I guess in everyone's mind, nomination is in focus. As the supervisor indicated, within 14 days' time, the current list is going to be produced. And this is where we will be placing emphasis on the general public, every person who are part of the electorate, to scrutinize that list, both online and especially in the physical places where they will be posted, at the post offices, at the revenue offices, at the medical facilities, police stations, and in private places once commission is had. We will be urging persons to check your registration, and as supervisor indicated, check for that you are in the correct PD, check that you are actually on the list. Once you have the knowledge that you have gotten registered, check that your name is spelled correctly and other pertinent information. And you have that 7-day period to raise your claims or objections for persons who are living within that constituency. So we will be placing emphasis on that. But nomination day is coming up, and I believe it's the 1st of June coming, where all of the potential candidates, the persons who will be contesting to be successful, to be representatives in the 15 constituencies, will have to come during that period from 9 until 12 and to meet the qualifying criteria. And we know normally it's quite a fanfare. There's a lot of drama and so forth involved with it. So this is one of the major things that is up and coming. And of course, the potential candidates would have to engage the various constituencies to collect those, whether the nomination forms, the declaration and such likes. But this is the next big thing, if we can say that, on our calendar, heading up to the 2020, the elections on 23rd of June?
Yes.
This year. So that's the next big thing.
You briefly mentioned the qualifying criteria for nomination day. Just highlight for us what needs to take place with the caretakers to ensure that they can officially become candidates come June 1st nomination day.
But I think one of the major things that is required of a caretaker, whatever, you want to be a candidate. You want to be able to contest that upcoming general elections. One of the things is that you need to have 6 persons who are registered in the constituency vouching for you. Okay? There is a form that they have to fill up saying that they nominate you. Okay, their names will go on that form. You would actually affix your signature there. But that form is critical, okay? And these persons, again, you cannot just take any person randomly. You need to take persons who are who are registered within the constituency. And on that form, those persons will place their names, but they will also place their registration number, because the returning officer on that day must be able to do a quick check and ensure that these persons are duly qualified to nominate you. Of course, there are other qualifying criteria. You must not, hold dual nationality, as the case may be. You must not be a certified bankrupt who has not discharged his responsibility in such a case. You must be able to read and write the English language, but there are provisions should you be, for example, if you are blind, then there's provision for that. If you don't have hands, okay, there are provisions for that. But it spells out all of the qualifying criteria that you must meet. Again, a critical one, as in years gone by, $300 was the nomination deposit. And what happened, you came to that nomination center, usually the constituency office, and you paid that money to the returning officer who issued you a receipt. Now, in this case, and we want persons to be aware of that, you will go to the revenue office and you will pay your $500. So it's not $300 anymore, it is now $500. And you will come to the constituency office during the hours of 9 to 12 on nomination day with your receipt, which you will give to the returning officer. So this is one of the critical aspects that persons need to be aware of. And we emphasize that a bit because I do remember a case years ago where someone actually came after the 12 o'clock period, not having met the requirements, and so was not able to meet that criteria. And we're trying to ensure that every person who is so desirous, are able to be nominated on that day.
So we've been speaking about what our politicians, the caretakers, need to do to prepare themselves. Tell us now, Grenadians, the voters, the people who are eligible, maybe even the people who are not eligible to vote. What do we need to keep in mind heading into the next, I think it's about 36 days until election day?
As a voter, what do you need to, you kind of touch on both categories, because if you are not registered, you would be on the fence viewing, you would be a spectator, and there's nothing that actually you can do as an individual except maybe express your sentiment. I feel, I desire, I wish. But for persons who are on the electorate, these are the critical persons who need to sit up and to pay attention, as you indicated, as we go forward towards the upcoming general elections. Critical, as was indicated a little earlier, you need to ensure that you are on that list. And we want to emphasize that. You need to ensure that you are on that list. You need to ensure that your information is there as you expect. And you might wonder, if we registered you, why should you ensure? Yes, now you are dealing with human beings. You are dealing with electronic equipment. You are dealing with, sometimes you can have a misprint, and all these things can happen. So the law makes provision. That's where claims and objections come in. Sometimes you may need to make a claim. We have heard at least 2-3 cases I have known of persons indicating that they noticed that they are in the wrong polling division. Now, the law makes provision for that. When this law was framed in 2011, 2012, it came into force in 2012, this current election law that we use. But they made provisions that things like that do happen. So we say to persons, don't, be taken aback when you hear that someone may end up in a wrong PD. It happens. And it's not the occasion to say, well, somebody is actually trying something. Or maybe someone's name was accident. It happens. So you have a responsibility as a potential elector going down to this general elections to scrutinize that list. And we expect persons to do so. Pretty soon, if it's not already done, on the online facility, you will be able to identify exactly where your polling station is. And we recognize that most persons are utilizing the online right now because it is much more convenient than actually having to go to a physical place to scrutinize a list. So it's probably on already, I'm not sure, but if not, pretty soon, maybe before the end of this week, if it's not already on, you will be able to check by clicking on that link with your registration information, and it will show you right down to where you will be casting your vote, right down to the polling station itself. So these are things that persons need to be aware of, because we have had the experience of persons going to the wrong polling station on election day. And persons need to be aware that their name is only going to be found in one polling station on election day. They will not be found in several others. Even though it may be in the same polling division, it will be only found in one polling station. So you need to be, that much aware of where you are voting. For persons who are working, and we do have a large working population already, we have had calls from employers, especially those that have a shift system, trying to find out what does the law says pertaining their people so that they can make the arrangement. We are saying to the employees, especially, who will be working, who will be coming to cast their votes on that day, to please, finalize arrangements. You know where you have to cast your vote, especially if you are living in a far area. Make those arrangements very early so you can have the necessary time to come and cast your votes. And we do expect that both the relationship between employer and employee will be so amiable that all parties will be facilitated. We do not envision so disrupting a business, that the management feels disgruntled because of this whole voting process. And at the same breath, we do expect that every potential voter who is working will be given the necessary time off to come and to cast their ballot. Please remember, as we go forward again, it's not you alone that is voting. So you come, you cast your ballot, and you demit the polling station ASAP so that you facilitate other persons. And again, we would also appeal to the general public, and we know of Grenadian hospitality. Cater for the pregnant women, cater for the persons with disabilities, cater for persons who are probably, according to Gypsy, yesterday's children, and so forth. You do all of that as you go forward. Thank you.
Gentlemen, let's take a quick break and come back with more. There are a lot of questions from our viewers and listeners that I'm hoping to get as many of them answered as possible. So we're going to take a quick break and come back. This is To The Point. We're speaking with officials of the Parliamentary Elections Office. We'll be right back.
Are you a small business and would like your business to grow? Do you have an event, products or services that people should know about? Be wise. Advertise. Book your spot on GBN Shopping Guide. Be part of Grenada's biggest advertising medium, the Grenada Broadcasting Network. Call our sales department now on 440-2446 or 440-3033 or GBN plus the number sign. Email us at sales@gbn.gd. Special conditions apply.
This is a message from the Ministry of Health. If you or a family member suspect that you may have contracted COVID-19 and are displaying symptoms, please immediately self-isolate at home. This means that you must also avoid all contact with other members of your household. Do not visit hospitals or health centers, as this creates the potential for further spread of the virus, and it puts additional persons at risk when you come into contact with them. Your best course of action is to call the COVID-19 hotline at 458-4787 or 538-4787 or contact your nearest health center or medical station. Once your information has been received, health officials will come to you. Help prevent the spread of COVID-19. This has been a message from the Ministry of Health.
B-O-Y-Z-I-E. I'm the madras. Looking for it. Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'm looking for it. We bound to find the Fed because I turn my GPS on. The party pumper they call me. Once the Fed is on, I bet you I will be right there. The cooler done set. Pocket check so I feeling irate. Destination check so you know we out for the party.
We believe this new virus spreads mostly from person to person through respiratory droplets produced when someone who is sick coughs or sneezes. This is similar to how flu and other respiratory illnesses spread. These droplets can land in the mouth or nose of people nearby, or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. Most
Welcome back. Welcome back to The Point. We're speaking with the Supervisor of Election, Elvis Morain, and Voter and Civic Registration Officer at the Parliamentary Elections Office, Ferdinand Phillip. We'll soon get to our viewers and listeners, but I just wanted to clarify something, gentlemen, in relation to the voter's ID card. I recall a news release issued last Friday in relation to not necessarily needing to replace your ID card to be able to vote, or you cannot be denied your right to vote because you do not have your ID card. So just explain it for me. I'll put it in simpler terms so everybody can understand what is required as it relates to presenting your voter ID card on election day.
Right, so one again to the listeners. The release dealt with two things specifically, lots of. We were emphasizing the fact that someone who didn't replace the voter's ID card at the time of that no more registration is happening, let me just go back. You cannot be denied if somebody didn't replace their card to vote on election day, right? So it means, therefore, that your first line is that you ought to be on the list. That's your constitutional right. You're on the list. So that is why Mr. Phillip spoke earlier, and he emphasized the need for, all electors to check, to avoid unnecessary delays, to make sure you're in the right PD, to make sure you're on the list and so on. Now, on election day, to minimize the occurrences of voter fraud, the elector will be asked to present his ID card. And his ID card, meaning the one that is issued. Not some people still are holders of the card before we came into being with the electronic system. That's the one, some little yellow card, a little blue card. We're not talking about the electronic card. And we also extended to say that if somebody presently is a holder of an expired card, the card will be used. I want to emphasize the fact that people are asking whether they can use a driver's license or use passport. No, it is your voter's registration card. So we verify the process. Now, likewise, if for some reason, and the Act is clear with that is concerned, it mentioned the fact that if a card was not issued to you, all right, so if a card wasn't issued to you, and you come up, you can't be denied. And this not issued to you, meaning that for some administrative reason that a card was not handed to you, but you are on the list. In that case, you will be required to take an oath. Likewise, if somebody showed up and the card is lost, defaced or what have you, and lost in meaning not just the card that was reissued to you, but your expired card. Okay, so let's suppose you didn't replace your card. and on election day, but your expired card is lost. So you don't have a card in as a speak. And I emphasize clearly what that expired card is. It's a card that carries the expiry date, January 31st, 2020. No other card. So once you present that, you can. If you don't have it, then you will be required to take a course. We are encouraging people to work with the card to minimize the delay, right, on polling day. So once you present, you're good to go. The presiding officer asks you the question, you proceed. So that is, we want it to be as seamless as possible. So we're asking, everyone, once you have your card, to hold the safekeeping and to work with it on the day, on polling day. Mr. Phillip, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I would also just remind persons, just the general information that polls, of course, open at 6 in the a.m. It closes at 5 in the p.m. We do expect on election day, please be mindful that at every polling station, a presiding officer is in charge of proceedings on that day. He or she is ably assisted by a poll clerk. And in some cases where we see it necessary, we have what you call marshals. Now, marshals are not part of the legislation, but we do see through years of experience that they do play a critical role in helping the smooth flow of the process. So they will, at several of the polling stations, be marshals. There will also be agents for the various political parties. And as I say that, I just want to remind the parties in focus that, get their people ready so that at whatever time the office engages them, because they are part of our legislative framework also, that, we will be able to do all the necessaries as smoothly as possible. But as Mr. Morain indicated, we want to facilitate the ease of voting for every person who comes out there and votes. So again, I cannot appeal enough and reiterate, as the supervisor said enough, that, you come there, you critical, your name is on that list. And even if, as he said, you have lost the card or it's destroyed or maybe it was not issued to you, once you know that your name is on that list, you can come out there and be part of that process. So it is critical, again, let me just re-emphasize, scrutinize that list. Make sure that your name is there.
All right, now let's open the phone lines and our platforms for our viewers, listeners who may have comments, questions, queries, concerns. The landline number 435-2041. That's also the WhatsApp number. Please, no calls on the WhatsApp, and you can continue to post your questions and comments on Facebook and YouTube. To our callers, if you can please keep our questions to, let's say, a minute or less so we can get to as many as possible, please, and thank you. Good morning, caller.
Yes, we are usually to the point, citizen. Well, listen, good morning and good morning to your guests. Can you guests hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very well, thank you very much. Listen, the last time you gentlemen were on radio here, I threw a question of serious concern out to you, and I was insulted when you told me, quote unquote, we work with the law and that is what is written. It is there in the recordings. I felt insulted. But I want to let you know, sir, the issue that I raised is of serious concern. Section 32, subsection 3 of the Constitution stipulates crystal clearly that the ballot should be carried out in a manner, quote unquote, not to disclose who the person votes for. However, Section 67, subsection 4 of the RPA, Representation of the People Act, states that people like me, quote unquote, a visually impaired person, has to take, quote unquote, a friend into the polling booth so that he or she the person can make the mark for he or she the voter. Now there's a difference there, a vast difference. And I couldn't consider it to be a violation of my rights if you were saying, in contrary to what the Constitution says, that I have to take somebody inside there to vote for me. How do you people reconcile this? And I recognize too that I've offered to show you people how the vote can be taken, how a visually impaired person can take a vote without anybody in their presence in a simple and most economic way, and you have refused to accept my consideration. And I consider this an insult, and therefore I'm challenging you today to guarantee that my rights are not violated when I enter that polling division or polling station on the 23rd of January of June. Thank you very much, and have a nice day, will you?
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Well, again, to answer the caller, he indicated that he felt insulted by the answer that was given last time. Again, there is provision for voters in special cases, and it makes provision for persons who have physical disabilities and for persons who are visually impaired. And unfortunately, I do understand his concern, and the legislation, we can only quote what the legislation says. However, both he and other persons should be aware that laws are not set in concrete, and eventually laws are amended. In some cases, laws are appealed by the continued agitation of individuals out there. What is critical to us, and we sometimes a person may express the sentiment that someone out there may speak of, but we must be seen to be applying the law as is written. However, as I indicated, as with this concern that the caller has raised, among others, we urge him to continue to agitate, and sometime, maybe in the near future, change can be had. Let me cite an example. We saw it as a courtesy to put the list posted online. Now, there is nothing in the law says that we have to do that. But what we do believe is that eventually it will become law. Okay, it may not happen because somebody, I understand that you said, why can't we post the information as soon as it is made available? And Supervisor rightly explained that it is a process and verification is critical here. But eventually, the facility may be made available once necessary structures can be put in place. Now, in the same way, as I said, to just conclude what I'm saying, the concern of the caller is duly noted, has been duly noted, and I do believe, sometime in the future, and I probably believe in the near future, that's my personal feeling, it will be addressed.
A question on Facebook. What time was the writ issued yesterday? It is my understanding that the registration process ceases when that is done. Individuals were present before that happened and should have been accommodated.
The blossom is interesting, with that question. How that person were aware that the people were present before the writ was issued. And I want to say this, sometimes I find it rather interesting and strange that people are out there making statements that they have no clue about, right? Now, the law is clear as to what time the writ is issued, right? So the writ was issued, and of course the signal that all registrations ceased. I mean, how is it that somebody could say that? The writ was issued yesterday morning at 8:30. So how could you say that the writ, that people were there in lines and they were denied? Our office is open at 9. So, I mean, we have to be able, and you could have just called the office to get that clarity. You didn't have to go and just make speculation that people were there and they were denied. Because our office open hours will not change. It's 9 to 5, right? So the writ was issued at that time. And it signals, based on the law, that all registrations cease.
A WhatsApp question. Somebody asks, who is responsible for removing deceased people off the voters' registration list?
The Supervisor of Elections. Removal of anybody on the list is the Supervisor of Elections.
Somebody on Facebook pointed out that just they noted, was it 6 or 9 deceased still on the voters' list?
And that could be a fact, right? Because it's a continuous process that we cleaning and so on. So that could be a fact. I wouldn't deny that.
How often is the list cleaned or purged, or?
The list is purged every quarter. Before every publication, I mean, you do that. Now, what we have sometimes with the debt in some cases, that we don't always have the updated debt list ready. So we sometimes have delays because we work with butts and debts to facilitate that process.
That was going to be my next question. Who provides the list? Is it that you request it of them, or they voluntarily send it to you every month, every quarter?
Well, let's say we work along with them, to get it. And we have a very, very good relationship with that is concerned. And while I get this, I want to also commend and congratulate, Ms. Mason and her team for the level of collaboration we received over the years in this regard, because it is also time consuming for us to do that. So, I mean, I really appreciate the fact that the office and how accommodating they are to the request and the kind of dialogue that we have in this regard.
Okay. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, good morning. I have a question. For police officers who is on the police list, if they're no longer a police officer and on the election day, when would they be voting? Would they still be voting on the police list or during the other date, like the 23rd?
Just to clarify, you asked about retired police officers?
No, not you. You may be on the list, but you are serving while the list is prepared and there. But somehow, if you are no longer a police officer on election day, what happens then?
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Let me answer that. As a police officer, a provision is made for you as an officer to vote 3 days before the general election. You are called a special elector. Now, before you become a police officer, you got registered on the general list. But when you became a police officer, you have to activate the process. Once you let them know you are a police officer, you present your police ID. Then you can I would use the word here guardedly, re-register on the police voters list. So your name would be removed from the general list. You don't have to pay $20 for transferring now, and you will be placed on the police voters list. Now, as long as you're a police officer, you will vote on the police voters list. Subsequent to that, you may be fired, you may retire, you may transfer out of the service, you may die, any one of these cases. But in most of the cases I've listed here, once you are moving from the police list back to the general list, again, you will not be charged. So we want police officers to be aware of that. Now, up to recently, an officer came and he said he retired sometime last year. And I believe it was on Monday he came. And he was inquiring because he's a senior guy. And he was wondering, should he go, because he's on the police list, should he go and register under the general list? And I advised him, he's young in age, and yes, there were crowds on that Monday. Stay where you are, okay? But as soon as the process recommences, go and get registered in the general list. You won't be charged. But generally, I would say here, if you are registered on the police list and you were inquiring about retired, your name will not be removed like that. But you have to go subsequent and do that replacement onto the general list. So you let them know you are no longer a police officer. They will remove your name from there and you will be replaced onto the general list free of charge to you. You will not be charged with $20. But to allay your fears, your name, if you're a police officer, you generally should be found on the police list.
Let me see if I can remember the Facebook question because I'm not seeing it anymore. Somebody on Facebook inquired what recommendations, if any, were adopted by the Parliamentary Elections Office, the recommendations made by the OAS following the last general elections. What recommendations made by the OAS were adopted, if any, after the last elections? I hope I got it right.
Certainly, Blossom, the one I mentioned earlier and emphasized, the use of your ID card. All right. While the law made provision for it, and of course, they said that it was not widely practiced. So it's something that we are definitely going to emphasize this election. All right. There were some other administrative things that we work on. There were some heavier ones that is about policy relative, for example, the one that deals with campaign financing, right? That's a policy decision. It's bigger than the office of the parliamentary election office that need to handle, so it's something that is one that we need to look at. And I would say in the strongest sense, Blossom, this one calls for more in the wider context of electoral reform. We have to look at that in the widest context in terms of how we move forward. Now, even some of the things of identifying like an elector on the day, apart from your card, they were talking about producing a list of a picture list, and those things. And we believe that this was not necessary because the act already covered, or we just apply the act, as how it's supposed to be applied, and that there should be no red flag where that is concerned. But in the widest sense of it, not just the recommendation from them, we also have to look at a new software. I mean, there's no question about that. We have to look at a new software. Some of the questions are asked not just by observers, but generally by the population. We definitely need a new software. Whereby, I mean, the headache we had with people back and forth and a lot of clarity relative to why should I bring all these documents to replace my card and not just update my application online in terms of the electronic system is something that we need to address. I mean, it's sort of, it doesn't reflect current reality in terms of how advanced we are. So I believe, a new software would address a lot of the concerns that we have, and it's something that I am advocating and believe once this election is over is an area of focus that should be for the office.
Another Facebook question. I heard there are Grenadians who reside in other countries for years, and every time election comes around, these are the same people bound on free plane ride that were organized by parties to vote. So the question here is words of people residing overseas for a long time and being able to cast your ballot. So just explain that for us while explaining what are the rules if you reside overseas. And then subsequent to that, any plans to accommodate people who reside overseas with, using a foreign phrase, absentee ballots, or so can cast their ballots from overseas. So one, dealing with Grenadians who reside overseas and may want to participate, how can we accommodate them?
All right, so quickly, Blossom, the one with the Grenadians residing abroad, we hear that all the time, right? Now, the law is very clear as to how you can be registered person. Now, a Grenadian residing abroad, that person has to be constantly out of Britain for 5 years, above 5 years, okay, to be removed from the list. So if a Grenadian stays abroad and you're on the list, and then you return, let's suppose, the last day before 5 years, all right, it means that the cycle starts. So that is what the law says. So the fact that people talking about people coming back, Grenadians are Grenadians. If you already say you're registered, and that is what is important. So the first thing is that they have to be duly registered. They must be in the list. All right, and that is the issue. The other part that you mentioned, what was the last part? I can't remember the last part of the question.
People being able to cast their ballots and can we accommodate absentee ballots? Right,
that is something, again, I said with my previous comment. This has to fit into the wider context of electoral reform. So for now, we can't accommodate it, but it's something that has to fit in the wider composition of electoral reform.
And just as a follow-up, how would you keep tabs on the Grenadians who have been out of the country consistently for over 5 years?
And And this is a difficult one. There's no question about it. I mean, administratively, it's difficult. And a previous program, I mentioned that. Now, what you can find is that there are people, and sometimes I believe some people underestimate the objection side of the act. Because the office would not know that John James has been out for about 5 years. However, if somebody has the evidence that that person is out, you can file an objection, right? And then we have to go to the detailed process to prove what you're saying is so. But I don't think somebody just come to see it. You should have at least with some evidence to suggest that this person has been out for more than 5 years. Because we've had situations where people query about this, and when you check, it was not true when we investigate, because that person comes back every year. Now, it doesn't mean that person, you might see the person in the area. If the person goes for a day or they come back for a few hours, the fact is that they're back, right? So it's something that we need to strengthen administratively, and similar to the relationship that now exists between us and birth and death is something that we need to also establish with the immigration authorities to see how we can really begin to really address this. But for now, we rely on the objection as a starting point to treat with those concerns.
Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
I just want to ask the folks, how long will continue with this voting after you don't vote? The dip your hand in this ink. Look at, you have songs that died years ago, and you go online now and you type in the name, and you could get the song that they played years ago. So I wish they could improve this thing. When you go to vote, they have one computer, you give your name, you have a number, and they could see if you vote anywhere already, instead of just everybody that vote had to dip their finger in an ink. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Gentlemen.
But also, there was a kind of distorted song, so I didn't hear you. Can you just recap?
Basically, why after we vote do we have to dip our fingers in ink when you can just take notes that we cast our ballots on a computer or a laptop or so? Why I have to dip my finger in ink? Short of the question.
Right. And all of this are good suggestions and noteworthy comments that we need to consider in the true reform, the true electoral reform. But as it is, that is where we are, and we have to consider, as Mr. Phillip said earlier, within the law which we operate. But I mean, certainly as time evolves, and so we have to get to the current realities to make sure that we make the process as seamless as possible, but at the same time, maintaining the integrity of the process.
If I might add there quickly, in terms of the ink, it is as part of law. Before a person is allowed to deposit their ballot into the ballot box, they are required to ink. And so we want to appeal to persons because we realize a lot of, especially the ladies nowadays, have some elaborate designs on their fingers, namely long fingernails. And the requirement is that that person and officers or election officers are trained as such, and they will require that you dip your finger in that ink before you are allowed to deposit that ballot into that ballot paper. So again, to facilitate the smooth running of the process, we appeal to persons who may have long fingernails to just prepare yourself, so that you will be able to facilitate the process by inking. And if you don't, then your ballot will be deemed to be spoiled. So we want to just appeal to persons in that regard.
A Facebook question: which section of the RPA speaks to citizens being removed after living abroad for 5 or more years? Representation of the People's Act. I just get it.
I can't quote the section now, but it's there. It's a caption which says who should be the registers of this right. So I don't have it in front of me. But of course, it's very much prominent in the Act.
And before we wrap up, a question that a lot of people have been asking, and I'm going to ask it from a WhatsApper. Somebody asks, can you say if any secondary schools are polling stations in light of the CSEC exam scheduled for June 23rd? So I know you mentioned yesterday that you'll be meeting with the Ministry of Education to sort this out. Any progress in the discussions? What are some of the things that you're thinking about can be implemented to facilitate both activities on the same day?
All right, so we very much in discussion still, Blossom. So we make a joint statement, shortly. The thing is that we can't say any. Okay, let me see. For elections, we know that there are some secondary schools that are used, but so far for this election, we have not published our polling stations. All right, remember we have to publish it. So at this time, we are looking at alternatives. We have looked at the schools and the areas that are affected, and that's from internally. We've had very, very preliminary discussions with the Ministry of Education, but we are also looking at, before we get to them with the proposal, we are looking at that because, of course, the issue of the 100 yards will come into play and so on. So it's something that we will make in due time, make a clear pronouncement as to how we go forward.
The last question that we can take in the interest of time, somebody on WhatsApp is asking, is it true that the electoral office is linked to the IT office in the Prime Minister's office? If yes, how long ago was that done?
Blossom, at every program I go, I address this. There is no truth to that, and I wish the entire population would get that now. There is no truth to it. We operate our central server at this office, and that's what we do. All right, so I hope that people would stop raising those things because there's no truth to that.
And with permission, if I can just add a little bit to that, a caller just previously indicated that they understand that people coming on they are paid, they are coming on free flights just on election day to vote, and that is a misrepresentation of the truth. And similar to what, the question that was just read about the person who understands or the person who was inquiring about the possible link, there is a lot of misinformation going on out there. And we have to be realistic to that fact. And, I'm appealing to the general population because one of the things, before I got involved in electoral matters, you had one perception about elections, especially in Grenada here. But when you actually got involved, when I got involved and, began to see the whole machinery, the framework, all of the legislation and everything that cohesively brings the function together, you get to realize, and it is the consensus of many persons from all walks of the political fence, that you cannot thief an election, as some people try to give the impression that it is very possible to do. It is rather difficult, and I'm speaking especially within the Grenadian context. And persons fail to realize that sometimes they rail so much against the office and against the electoral workers and so forth. But when you hear the esteemed opinion of persons on the outside here, electoral experts among others, we rate very highly, both in the Caribbean and in the wider world context. Persons do commend us, they do cite the Grenadian example on so many occasions, and something Grenadians need to be aware of. On many of the cases when they do observer missions to other territories, sometimes not even within the Caribbean, one of the most often picked island that they utilize the observer team from is from Grenada. They utilize all officers because they recognize the quality of what we produce here. So I am appealing to persons. Yes, we are not perfect. And yes, there are always going to be issues that you need to agitate about. And we encourage constructive criticism. What we think is a disservice to our electoral system and to our nation as a whole is when persons in a malignant manner try to pull down, to destroy the whole process, to bring about an area of discredit to our electoral process, which in the eyes of others is rated very highly. So my appeal goes out. I know we probably do not have a code of conduct. We probably do not have so many of the safeguards that we need to help protect the image of our electoral system. But we appeal to persons out there. Let's agitate, let's debate on the substance of the matters that are at hand so that come June 23rd, our election will continue to be the model of elections throughout the world over.
Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you both for being our guest this morning. Like I said when we started, I know it's busy times for you both. 30 seconds, final thoughts as we move forward.
Yes, Blossom. I can't leave here without expressing my appreciation and thanks to the registration officers, the assistant registration officers, the staff, and the Parliamentary Electoral Office. In particular, for their service on Monday. It was a difficult day, albeit that, a number of people decided, look, I am not going to come out before, but we were able to pull through, and we were able to get, everyone, try to serve everyone as best as possible. So, kudos to them for the hard work and so on. I want to just say to the general, and I want to also congratulate the public, because I think generally, while you had some little concern, generally I think people cooperated well. Generally, I saw people help to navigate and to maintain order, which was excellent. And of course, these people must be commended for that effort. But I want to say to the general public as well that we get into an election. Mr. Phillip talked about it into the real meat of the election period. And we ask everyone to be responsible. We ask everyone to, of course, let us inform, let us educate, and let's not agitate for the wrong reason. Yesterday I see also a thing out there, all in a misinformation, trying to create a state of chaos. This is not important. It's for us. If we are genuine about the electoral process, let us work together so that at the end of the day, we all can feel proud. And sad, people who know better. I wish that some people who I know better would be a little more responsible. Even some of the social media posts, be more responsible, and let us try to educate. Let us try to inform, because everyone has someone that he or she can influence. And I think if we do that, we all will be proud of ourselves. I don't take, and I tell all my workers in the electoral process now, don't take whatever comments are made personally. Because I tell you, Blossom, if we don't fix that, it doesn't matter who sits in these chairs after, we would have the same thing. We need to evolve as a society, we need to be mature, and we need to work for the greater good of the society. So once again, Blossom, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity. And I want to thank all those who comments, those who ask questions, and who listen. We continue to work together, and I hope at the end of the day we can all feel proud, of this year's elections. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Morain. Thank you very much, Mr. Phillip. Continue doing what you're doing, and let's journey on to what I pray and hope will be fair elections come June 23rd, 2022. So thank you very much both, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.
That was the Supervisor of Elections, Elvis Morain, and Voter and Civic Registration Officer in the Parliamentary Elections Office, Ferdinand Phillip. We thank them both for being our guest, and thank you, viewers and listeners, for tuning into To The Point. I have stolen 5 minutes of mid-morning buzz from GT. Hopefully, he'll forgive me for that. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. It's time for me to head on out. I'll be back tomorrow morning, God willing, when I link up with Gary, Mr. Smooth, on Good Morning Grenada. Until then, stay safe.